y'all for taking, I guess, an hour out of your Saturday night to spend on some educational content. But so in case y'all didn't know or were lost, this is our first intro workshop. And today we're going to be discussing what UI UX is. So the outline of this, I guess, workshop or presentation today is broken down into who, what, how, where, and why. So who can be a designer? What is UI UX? How does the design process work? Where does design fit in at companies and generally in the product development cycle? And why are designers important? So who can be a designer? Do you need a certain degree or background to be a designer? So just a brief background on me. I'm a designer. So if y'all didn't know, I'm Andy. I am a senior at Weiss. I am pursuing a BA in cognitive sciences. I have about 3 years-ish of design experience. And before that, I had absolutely no experience in design or anything related to the arts. And what I'm most interested in is working with startups and designing from scratch. So the quick lowdown is even now currently, I am not into photography at all. I don't do graphic design. I'm more interested in code and data models and business strategy. So on the flip side, if y'all don't know Tina is also a brilliant designer at Rice. Tina is getting a BA in psychology and sociology, and Tina has 6 years of design experience. In high school, she worked on the yearbook design club and photography as well. And Tina would like to work with established design-centric companies. So thinking along the lines of like Hulu or Apple, or basically companies that have like a very established design practice. And Tina, on the flip side, Tina does not like coding. Tina is not inclined towards business strategy, but Tina does love photography and graphic design. So basically this boils down into anyone can be a designer. So you are, insert your name, and you can get a BA or BS in whatever you want from Rice. However, I will say that most often you'll see a lot of designers who perhaps aren't formally trained in design or have gone to design school. A lot of them have degrees in things like psychology, because it sort of helps you understand, I guess, what people are thinking and why they make the decisions they do. And you can have any variety of design experience, whether it was in high school, maybe you also did yearbook, or maybe you did some photography or anything. And do you not have a background in design or arts or coding? No one cares. All that matters is now that if you are interested in anything about UI, UX, or design in general, here you can learn about it. So if you're interested in startups, great. There are designers working with startups. If you want to work at Fortune 500 companies, also great. There are many designers working for those. Are you more inclined towards working for 2C companies or products that are facing consumers? There are products and companies for that. To business companies, there are also people for that. So on this right side, you can sort of see what me and Tina's, I guess, inclinations were, where I was more focused on coding and business strategy, while Tina really enjoyed photography and graphic design. That doesn't have to hold you back. Maybe you're interested in none of those things. Maybe you like working with big data or animation or marketing or user research, or service design, process engineering. You can sort of find any sort of niche inside of UI, UX design, or the product design sphere in general. So don't worry if you think maybe, oh, this might not be the field for me because I don't exactly like the arts, or, oh, I thought I needed coding. You don't need any of that. I am going to show you what it exactly is. So with that out of the way, what is UI, UX? Are they just buzzwords? Do companies sort of just throw those words out and pretend they know what they're talking about? And what's the difference between the two? So these are my definitions for what UX and UI is. I as you start learning more about design or as you start delving in, you'll quickly learn that people have sort of slight tweaks on what they think UI, UX is. But the general idea is that UX is the journey a user undertakes to accomplish a task the product has been recruited for. So I know that has a bit of ambiguous or confusing language, but it is basically what everything the user does that interacts with the product. So that could be anything from their onboarding experience, which means how they came across your product or how they set up an account with whatever your company does, to how the company branding and stuff looks. So anything that deals with the interaction between a user and the product that you're making falls under the umbrella of user experience or UX. Now, more specifically, UI is strictly about the digital design field. So UI is the visual look and feel of a product to guide users along that journey of UX. So you can sort of think about it like UX is the skeleton and muscles of the product, and UI is the skin. So another analogy that I really like is that UI and UX is sort of like an iceberg. So UI, or GUI, which stands for graphical user interface, is the tip of the iceberg that you'll see or that users will see. And then UX is everything underneath that iceberg. So UX can encompass, like I said before, it could be the onboarding experience, it can be the flow or how users get from one place to another on your product. It could be the marketing, it could be the branding, it could be, so UX basically just encompasses everything that's deeper about your product. So I know that can be sort of still a little bit ambiguous about UI, UX. So we can go through some examples now to see exactly what I'm talking about when I say UX and UI. So this is Notion. So Notion is basically a note-taking platform. So as you can see, Notion's UI, or the user interface, is really simplistic. There is not a lot of colors. Even the font is one generic style of sans serif. So when we say UI, what we're talking about is all the colors. So as you can see, the color is very muted, and it's just basically white with a little off-white for sort of grouping. And then when we say the UX of this product, we're talking about the interactions where what happens when I click on this arrow. So what is this sort of flow that's happening? Oh, it's sort of a nested information architecture, or how the information is displayed is how UX, or is what the UX is. So they could have done this in a million other ways. Like they didn't have to choose it where it was with drop downs or everything that's nested like this. And specifically, for instance, if you wanted to create a new page with this product, UX is talking about what happens when I click this arrow. So what will be the interaction that will occur when I want to add something? So UX is deciding when I click this arrow, it will give users a drop down with all the options that they can do. UI is talking about, oh, what does this arrow look like? What is the color of this arrow? And UI is talking about what will the text say? How far apart should the text be? What images am I using to represent these things that I can add to the page? So that is the UI, is purely visual, and it generally encompasses typography, color, and language. So UX is everything else about how the page is laid out, what happens when you click on things, why do things on your product behave the way they do, and then UI is dealing with all of the visual, why does it look this way, or the skin of the product. So another example is on Airbnb's website. So the UX of the Airbnb website is why they chose to lay out this experience for finding a Airbnb house, apartment, or etc. So Airbnb's designers decided, their UX designers decided that the way they wanted their users to go about booking a house would be broken down into four, I guess, major requirement criteria. So first, obviously, most importantly, they need to ascertain what location the users are looking for. And then UX is deciding that, oh, when they want to look for a location, how we're going to display it is they can look for nearby locations, or we can go through their recent searches. So that's the UX of it. And then the UI would be, oh, what is the font we're using? What are the colors? Does this drop-down menu have a certain color, etc.? So again, UX is deciding what we're actually showing them and how we want to show it to them. UI is deciding how it looks. So colors, again, colors, typography, etc. So with those examples in mind, we're now moving on to the how. So now that we know a little bit about the differentiation between UX and UI, how does that actually fit into the work that you do? So how does the design process work? Where do you start and where does it end? And how do you actually, quote unquote, do design? So this is actually my most favorite graphic of all time when I'm trying to tell people what designers do. So you can think of design as sort of this process that sort of diverges and converges. So what I mean by that is, as you can see, you start on the left, and this initial insight that you get is sort of that spark or that brilliant idea that you have. So for instance, going back to the Airbnb example, the instant spark was that the founders, they stayed at someone's, I believe they stayed at a friend's house on the couch or something, and they thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could connect people that have availabilities inside of just their homes with people that are looking for alternatives to just hotels? So that's sort of the initial insight. And then from there, what happens is they move on to discovery or research. So in this phase, what they are doing, they are diverging from that initial idea. So what that means is they're sort of exploring, what does this idea actually mean? Who would benefit from this? And they're trying to figure out as much as they can about this initial insight. So they're doing the research behind the users, they're doing research behind if there are similar products, they're doing research behind how they can sort of take this idea and actually bring it to fruition. So that's the discovering phase. Now, moving on to the next stage is when the ideas start converging, hence the diamonds sort of getting smaller. And that phase is define, and it's sort of the action you're taking is synthesis. So what that means is you're taking all of those ideas that you found in the discover phase, all that research that you've done, and you're trying to narrow it down into actionable things or like actionable plans, and you're trying to define what the actual problem is. So for instance, again, talking about the Airbnb, once they've gone through all that research, the defined problem is that there is no way to connect people with available homes or available places to stay with the broader consumer base. So after they did all that research, they're basically, as they were defining it, they were trying to narrow down exactly what problem they're trying to solve. And at the end of this stage, they sort of have a defined problem, and now they can move on to sort of developing the solution to it. So in this stage, the third stage, develop or ideation phase, this is when they take that problem and now they're just coming up with solutions for it. So in this process, they're diverging again. So what that means is, again, sort of like the discover phase, they're going really wide. So now that they have an idea of what the problem is, they're trying to sweep wide and find as many solutions are trying out as many solutions as they can. So what this stage usually entails is trying out as many ridiculous ideas or as many far out ideas as you can, and seeing sort of what's the one that's right for your situation. So at the end of this third develop or ideation phase, you are converging onto one solution. So in this fourth stage, deliver or implementation, is when you're taking the ideas that you worked on in the develop phase and you're sort of narrowing it down to one. And it is in this stage is when you're sort of coming up with those refined sort of prototypes or those refined ideas. And then at the end of this stage is when you actually deliver a solution. So another way you can look at this process very broadly is the first two, divergence and convergence, is designing the right thing. So what that means is in these two phases, you're not even reaching the solution yet. In this phase, what you're trying to do is figure out what exactly the problem is so that you can make the right thing. It is only inside of stage 3 and 4, when you're doing the next cycle of divergence and convergence, is when you're actually dealing with solutions. So in that stage, you are designing the thing right. So after you know what you are designing is correct for the problem, you are now trying to make it the right way. So what I want you guys to take away from this basically is that a lot of design isn't necessarily just working on these beautiful screens and coming up with all these really picture perfect solutions. A lot of what design is, I know it sounds really cliche, but it's problem solving. And the quote that I want to emphasize to y'all is, you can spend an hour teaching anybody from the streets Figma or Sketch, which are sort of design softwares for designing screens. What you're getting paid to do is ask the right questions and find the right solutions. So designers, what your value to companies isn't someone who's just making beautiful screens. What your value is you are asking the questions that need to be asked so that you can find the solution that's right for your company and for the users. So again, I really want to emphasize this to y'all. Design isn't about making really beautiful screens, or it isn't really about even just coming up with solutions. First, the very first important step is you have to understand users and what the problem is for them. So what a good design is a good design has a reason for every button, slider, and pixel. So what I mean by this is, you can tell when a design is good is when you can't find a reason behind, or you can find a reason behind every decision that's laid out on the screen. So why is the button there in a certain place? Why did you choose to use a drop down? Why didn't you choose to use this other interaction? A good design has a reason for everything. I know that sounds like a lot, but the better a product is, the better and more reasons it has for every decision that was made. And moving on to the second bullet point, a good design balances the goals of a user and business. So if you take classes on UX or you take design classes, what's really emphasized is, designers are the advocates for users. You always want to keep users in mind, and users are the most important people. However, at the end of the day, you are also most likely going to be designing for a company as well. So yes, you are speaking for the user, but you also need to consider the business, because if you're speaking for the user, but not considering the business restrictions, then it doesn't matter how much of an advocate you are, because if it's not doable or if it doesn't make sense for the business to implement, then your ideas will never come to fruition. So it's a balancing act. You're trying to balance what the goals of the user are and what the goals of the business are, and that's the reality. So finally, a good design, as I've emphasized before, is a solution for the right person at the right time in the right place. So what I mean by that is, again, your solution is driven by all the problem definitions and all the research you do before. So the more you understand about your user and the more you understand about the situation and when they're using the product, the better your product's going to be at the end of it. So on to our fourth general section. Where does design fit in? So I've talked a lot about, oh, this is what design is, what your role is sort of this problem solver. You understand the problem and then you try and provide the correct solution. But how does this look like inside of a company? So what is the workflow? So this is the typical, I guess, product puzzle. So what typically happens is you are working generally very closely with a project manager and a developer. So what a project manager does is they find the opportunities and requirements that the business needs to be fulfilled. So they are the sort of ones that are telling you, oh, the business wants to maybe increase their market. They want to increase the user base of 18 to 20-year-olds. So they'll find you the requirements of, these are your users that we want to target. These are the features we want to include. And now as a designer, what your role is, you're exploring that. You're trying to define the real problems and you're designing solutions for that product. And then what developers do is take your screens and they take your solutions and they're the ones that go off and sort of build it with code. Or yeah, so basically project managers, they find out all the prerequisite information and what the business needs from you. You sort of draft up the blueprints for what the solution should look like. And then the developers are sort of the builders that go out and actually build the product. So, but at the end of the day, design is everywhere. So like I said, UI UX is the blueprint and foundation of not only successful products, but of entire businesses. So what I mean by this is that when a UI UX designer gets their hand on a product, their goal is to communicate what the users want and then balance that with what the business wants. So not only are they trying to build the best product for users in the business, but ultimately that has an impact on the business itself. So you are, as a designer, you are the ones that are sort of laying the groundwork and the blueprints for everything that your company does. So that is very important. So design is everywhere. So along that same vein, nothing exists in a vacuum at a company. So designers aren't sort of just sectioned off and work is just sort of linearly passed along. So what actually ends up happening is that you end up doing also a lot of QA developer work. And what that means is quality assurance. So after you pass off a plan to the developers, oftentimes you'll have to go back and figure out if they implemented your plan exactly as how it should be, and if there are any bugs or inconsistencies with your plan. You'll also have a lot of feature requirement changes that will go to and from the project manager or PM. So a lot of times when PMs will give you this requirement, you'll do some research and you'll find out that, oh, maybe this requirement isn't what you think it is, or oh, maybe there's another feature that we think needs to be added. So there's a lot of back and forth with PMs as well. And also, because you're an advocate for the user, you'll also get a lot of feedback from customer relations or the support staff. So maybe this product that you designed has a lot of bugs. Our users are running into a lot of issues. You'll probably get some feedback from customer relations and you'll have to take that feedback and act on it. So again, you're not existing in just your own design world. And once you pass things off, it's not like everything is great and you're done with your work. Also, you'll also get a lot of market research from business development teams. So what I mean by this is, again, while you are an advocate for the users, you also have to balance that with what the goals of your company are as well. So you'll get a lot of information from biz dev people, and they'll be telling you, oh, this doesn't really make sense for our business, or oh, we don't think like the money will be there or the funding will be there, or oh, we think targeting this users will be more suited. So you'll also get a lot of feedback from business development people as well. So all this culminates into this idea that good designers are designers that are adaptable and you can work with and for others. So the final slide I have for y'all tonight is, why are designers important? So we've sort of talked about what the entire process is, how it fits in, what design is, but now at the end of the day, why are designers important? What does good design offer companies? Why do you even want to be a designer? Excuse me. So your value as a designer and what you can offer companies is an understanding of users and their values, which inevitably leads to better solutions. So once you understand users and what drives them, you will be able to build a better product that sort of captures them. Also, your value as a UI, UX designer is that competitive edge. So we are in a world where a bunch of products are coming out at all times, and there's a bunch of alternatives for everything. So how can a product stand out in these sort of saturated markets? So what I mean by that is, why use Spotify? Why use Apple Music? Why use Pandora? Why use any of these things? The competitive edge that will make some products stand out is their UI UX. So if the product understands what users are trying to do and can sort of cater to that, then they will sort of obviously have the competitive edge. So users will like using the products more. They'll feel more listened to. Also, your value as a designer for the business is you're conveying the value the product has to the customers. So there's this sort of idea that, oh, if I come up with a really good product, it does, maybe UI UX doesn't matter, you know? If the project is that revolutionary, then who wouldn't want to use it? But time and time again, we've seen that yes, a product can be amazing, but if you're not conveying that or communicating what the product does for the user, then it's almost useless. So what you're doing as a UI UX designer is also telling customers or communicating with customers what the value that your product or business offers them. So here is sort of the pros and cons of being a designer. Why would you want to be a designer, or why would you not want to be a designer? So the pros are, it is a relatively newish and evolving field of work. So UI UX is a sort of subset of ergonomics engineering. So recently, with the sort of like, I guess, the quote unquote advent of computers throughout the 90s and the 2000s and 2010s now, UI UX have sort of started to blossom. So the field is relatively new and it is constantly evolving. Now we're sort of getting into the areas of VR and AR and, oh, what does UI UX look like for those new sort of revolutionary technologies? Another pro is you'll get to work with people and technology. So I like to rag on developers a little bit, but like I was actually interested in being a software developer, but sort of the idea of just coding every day and not sort of taking account people and like what people want sort of bothered me. So maybe that's you. Maybe you really like technology, but you also want to work with people. UI UX allows you to do that. Also, like I've touched on before, UI UX has a lot of specializations and sort of subfields. So what I mean by that is UX, like I said before, the definition for everyone sort of varies a little bit, but because it covers everything about a product, it covers anything minute can sort of become its own specialization. So for instance, a subpart of UX is interaction design, and that field specifically involves itself with just what happens when users click on certain things or what happens with certain interactions like sliders or like drop downs. So that field of work is very targeted and specific just about interactions and not even about like anything else about UX, like the layout of a page or what features need to be where. Interaction designers only care about, oh, if users slide this, how fast will it be going? Or like, if they slide this, what else changes? So they're very specific on action and sort of conveying that action through the screen. Also, another pro about UI UX, the money. UI UX designers get paid pretty well. I wouldn't say on par with developers, but I would say it's very easy to get on par with developers at good companies. So because we're in a technical field and obviously UI UX is valued greatly, you'll get compensated really well. So why would you not want to be a designer? So as a designer, and because UI UX sort of works in this hard to define sort of area, you are constantly justifying your existence. So what I mean by that is even within your own company, you'll be always, UI UX designers are unfortunately usually the first ones to be let go during a economic recession. So UI UX designers, you'll always have to sort of fight for your place and fight for your suggestions and why they sort of need to listen to you. With UI UX also comes some parts of imposter syndrome. So developers will often maybe not think you're really needed, or they'll be like, oh, UI UX, just, you know, if I have some pretty colors, that's basically it. You know, like, why does it matter if this button is 32 pixels away versus this button that's 42 pixels away? While you might know it matters a lot, it's hard to convey that to some stakeholders. Also, within just the design world as well, you'll see a lot of designers that are like absolutely brilliant. You'll see like them come up with like the craziest solutions, and you'll wonder to yourself like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Or like, oh, why can't my screens look like that? So you'll deal with a lot of like, oh, I don't think I'm a good enough designer. But what I will emphasize to y'all is that everyone has their own strengths to offer. So again, imposter syndrome is something that sort of you have to deal with internally. So another con is that UI UX works in ambiguity a lot of the times. So a lot of the times the solutions or problems that will be communicated to you, they won't be as, I guess, well thought out or exactly mapped out. A lot of times you're the one that's going out there and finding things. So if you're not okay with sort of working in a little of the I don't know territory, then maybe this might not be a field for you. And the final con is UI UX is definitely a field that is a little more difficult to start and sort of up level your career. So what I mean by that is because UI UX is such a newish field, there isn't a lot of sort of established ways to teach yourself UI UX. So sort of like the entire reason for why Rice Design was started was because of the lack of design resources and community at Rice. But you'll find out a lot of times that when you're trying to learn about new topics or you're trying to dip your toe in the industry and get started, a lot of it is you have to go out there yourself and find the things. You have to sort of figure out what you're interested in and sort of be dedicated to finding it and teaching yourself it. And as with regards to up-leveling your career, the only way to get better as a designer is constant, real practice. So you can do as many self-projects as you want, but what you ultimately need at the end of the day is a chance to work on a real project to see sort of what it's like to work with real users, with a real business, and with real stakeholders. So that's sort of the difficulty that you'll have as a designer. So I know we went a little bit over the time limit, but thanks y'all for listening. If you have any questions, I will be sticking around for pretty long. And here are some events to look forward to. On October 9th, there is someone coming in from IBM that's doing an intro to HTML and CSS. On October 10th, my co-lead, on October 10th, sorry, the graphics leads for UX for the Rice Design Club are having a basics in Illustrator and Photoshop workshop. And then on October 11th, my co-lead in UIUX is hosting a workshop for how to get your career started in UIUX. And if you guys have any questions, you'll feel free to reach out to me on email or DM me on the Discord or Facebook message me if we're already friends. Yeah, just always feel free to reach out. I'll paste my email in the chat, even though it might get lost a little bit. Okay, thanks y'all. If you have any questions, just I guess unmute yourself and speak.